Guys, so good to have you here. What a thrill. Give it up one more time. Slash, Mike Clink.
And Mike.
I said Mike.
Oh, I didn't hear.
So we're going to talk all about Orgy of the Damned. But before we do that, do you guys recall the first time you met? What do you remember about the first time you guys met? It might have been on Appetite. I don't really know.
What do you remember about the very first? I remember the first time we met was at SAR Studios on Santa Monica Boulevard. You and Steven and Duff and Izzy were there, and there was a table sitting between us, and I think half the band was on one side and half the band was on the other, and it was quite the time to actually get to meet you guys. You know, I was used to doing kind of pop records with people that were a little bit more subdued, and this was anything but it was my introduction to Guns N' Roses, and that was the first time that I met you. I had met Axl previously. I met Axl at Geffen Records, and he wasn't
I remember
there.
that now.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. But was that before we recorded Shout of Your Love or after?
That was the
was
very
before.
first time.
Yeah.
Yes.
So to start talking about Orgy of the Damned, I know in reading some of the backstory that your grandmother actually had a lot to do with your appreciation for or introduction to the blues. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, it's a sort of a good story because my my dad in England, when I was living in England, turned me on to. I mean, he didn't turn me on to. I was in the environment of hearing the Who and the Kinks at max volume day in and day out for a few years, and
Not a bad thing
and
either.
it was great. You know, it was great. But when I moved to the States, I was very weaned on British rock and roll, and my grandmother, being very American, said, "Well, you know where they got that from." And then she played me B.B. King, and I mean, I didn't know anything. I didn't know from Adam anything about music technically or anything like that. But I remember it was very moving, so it stuck with me.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and from that point on, I was exposed to a lot of great blues stuff.
And I read that B.B. King, in particular, became sort of a North Star.
He's still my favorite blues guitar player, the one who really sort of touches me with his choice of notes and his style and the way that he sings and all that.
Yeah, his style was so unique. You know, he wasn't necessarily in, guitaristic terms a shredder per se, but there was so much soul in everything.
Every note, or every two notes or three notes or four notes. I mean, sometimes one note can do it, but he managed to do it with as many notes as he would put into a phrase. It was really, really effective.
Yeah, and this album, Orgy of the Damned, is, kind of the next step after, if you will, the Blues Ball. It was, kind of the next thing. And granted, it was maybe, a couple decades later or whatever. But tell me a little bit about the origin of this album in your thinking.
Well, okay, so in the 90s, I met the guys who are actually made up the Blues Ball, and I used to jam with them all the time. And it was a very fun and drunken kind of a thing. But we finally ended up putting a band together called the Blues Ball, and we went and we toured around on it, and we had a great set list, and we had a blast. And I always thought, I would love to record this, and make a record or something. But, as it would have it, there was so much serious stuff going on in my life as well around that same time that it just didn't happen. So I started other bands and so on. And so all these years later, that's still been kicking around in the back of my head. And I had a break on the Guns N' Roses tour, the last tour that we did. And I thought, I want to make that record. And so I called Ted and Johnny, who I've been in touch with all this time, and said, let's go and make this record. And so Teddy, who's the consummate collector, managed to dig up some set lists from like 1997. And so we referenced those, and I had some other songs I wanted to do that we didn't do, and we got together and just started jamming on them, and in pretty short order, you know.
And how did you bring Mike in? When did Mike become a part of the project?
Well, as soon as we started getting into it, Mike was the first and only person I thought of.
Why?
To produce it, because I just knew that he would be able to get it to sound the way it should sound. Mike's great. I mean, he's right here. I don't want to speak about you in third person, but
Well,
he's great at capturing a real guitar sound and making it so that it sounds like a real guitar. And he's same with the rest of the equipment, you know, the bass and drums and
Sure.
so on. And so he was just the choice that to get us to sound the way that we sound, but make it sound, make it sound good.
When he called you and said, you know, I want to do this blues album, your first thought?
In all honesty, he did not take me serious. I could tell for the first week and a half that he wasn't really sure what the fuck I was talking about.
Okay, explain that.
Well, Slash called and mentioned that he wanted to make this record. So I said, well, we need to get together and talk about it. And we met for lunch. And just like every record I make, you know, you just don't go in the studio and start recording. You really need to find out what the vision of the artist is. So I talked to Slash. I said, what do you want to do? How do you want to make this record? And we talked about it. And I went down to rehearsal and heard the band. And after I heard the band, I said, well, you know, I could do this. I'm in. I mean, blues is not my specialty, not what I'm known for. I mean, I do a lot of different genres of music, but I'd never done a specifically blues record. But to Slash's point, what I do is that I'm really good at capturing the energy from a band. And we started with that. So I went down to rehearsal a couple times and kind of let it develop at that point. But
And in a vacuum, when someone says to you blues album, as a producer, what do you think?
well, at that time I thought traditional blues. You know, just, you know, we're talking about the Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, B.B. King kind of thing. But I soon learned after going to rehearsal that it was Slash's interpretation of the blues. And what was interesting is that I started listening to the radio, and all I listened to, the only records and music I listened to was the blues. And I found out that there's so many different interpretations of the blues. There's so many ways that people interpret the blues. And I became very comfortable with what we were going to do. And had total faith and trust in the decision of the songs, and went with it.
Yeah, it actually really important is when I got into this, what I didn't want to do is have it be me doing a traditional blues record, because I just do what I do, and I'm a rock and roll guy, you know, through and through. So blues is a very important part of that expression, but I'm still turning it up to 10, and I like everything to be a certain way, you know. And so in doing this, I wanted to pay an homage to all the stuff that I grew up listening to, but do it my own way, you know, the way that I feel comfortable doing it, not to be misinterpreted as all these different guys who are serious blues-focused musicians, and that's what they do. Because I didn't want to pretend like, hey, I'm doing this now, you know. I wanted to do something that was just me doing these songs, but also playing with really great blues musicians who know what the fuck they're doing. You know, so it came out cool. It didn't come out sounding like I was trying to be something I'm not.
Yeah, and you definitely didn't want it to be an academic project.
This is a lot of reason why I called Mike as well.
But you did mention that you wanted to aspire to or live up to the blues ideal in your mind. What in your mind, what is the blues ideal?
I wanted it to be live. I wanted it to have feel, you know. I wanted to have a great sort of sense of rhythm, and a lot of the stuff that I love about the blues that has influenced my way of playing to bring that to the fore, to make it sound as true to life as in spirit,
Right, right. And there's probably nobody on the planet, Mike, who knows and understands Slash's style, his tone, the way he approaches his music than you, quite frankly. And I'm wondering what the discussions were like, if there were discussions, about the sonics of this record, about the way you wanted the record to sound.
Well, I knew I wanted it to sound live, and that was one of the things that Slash and I had talked about. We wanted it to be recorded in a room with everybody together. It's just so much easier because you can make decisions on the fly. And I don't like making records in closets, and I like to get everybody together and interacting with each other because musicians play differently.
it's so much a part of the essence of what music, rock and roll
Exactly.
especially, should sound like.
Yeah, I mean, the musicians play differently when they're in a room together and things happen. There's fantastic accidents that actually happen. Something that's not planned. They go, "Oh my God, you did that! We're going to take advantage of that. That's something that's really cool."
Yeah.
And even though we went into rehearsal, we didn't over rehearse it. We knew the arrangements, we knew the songs, but there was a little bit left to the imagination, and it was just about capturing, the band in the best performances possible, and that's kind of what I wanted to do. Is
What's the key to doing that? What's the key to getting a great live on the floor recording in your mind?
well, first of all, I think you have to make the band comfortable. You have to know that you have their best interest at heart, and know that the performances that I think are the best performances are the best that they can do. There's no second guessing. And that was one of the things, that's interesting, with Slash. I mean, I think we both know, it's inherent that we both know which are the best takes, and he would go out there and I would work on something. So when we were in the studio working, I would hear something and then we would stop, we would make some adjustments, and we ended up with things that everybody was happy with, and with the live part of it. Like I said, I mean, I can't explain how I do it. I mean, I really don't want to analyze it too much.
Right.
But I'm really good at being able to pull out an energy, and that's kind of letting people go and do their thing. I mean, we have great musicians out there. I mean, these guys are fantastic musicians. It's just pointing out maybe one or two little things and let them go.
And you can hear that in every track. It jumps out of whatever you're listening to it on. When you're doing that, kind of live on the floor setting, are you willing to trade feel for perfection?
No. I mean, the feel thing is probably the most important thing, and so you let a lot of imperfections go by to capture that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, let's talk about some of the guests on the album, because it's an unbelievable lineup. Paul Rodgers and Gary Clark and Demi Lovato, and the list goes on and on. I haven't written down, but it's an amazing list of people. Some are surprises. First, how did you choose these guests?
Really very little thought went into all this. I mean, we've talked about a bit more than
I like that.
It's true. But when I would, think this is the song I want to do, automatically, once I come to the idea that I was going to use outside singers for it, then I just pick a song and just think who came to mind. And in most instances on this record, everybody who was my first thought is who ended up singing on the record. So there was just like that automatic idea that came just from thinking about the song and somebody singing it and going, Brian Johnson. I don't know why, because I know Brian really well, but I don't know a lot about his history, and I know obviously I know his voice really well, but to have him, to call him up to ask him if he wanted to do Killing Floor was sort of like a stretch because I didn't know where his influences went beyond AC/DC, really, when it comes down to it. But there's something that told me Bryant. So I called him up, and he was so excited about doing Howling Wolf and that particular song because he had a history with it that I had no clue about. And so when we went to go do the session, he was so into it, and it was the right call because he brought his voice down to fit the song, and it just became a whole thing.
Well, and that's something we should talk about for a minute because this is a Brian Johnson, if you haven't heard the record, that you've never heard, singing in what I would call his natural voice. It's I want to hear more of that.
We did a live performance a couple of weeks ago in London, and it was great. Doing that
I'm
song
sure.
and him singing it live, it was killer.
But tell me about working through that with him. Did he start out in that register?
No, I mean, we went down to Florida to record with him, and I do have to say it was one of the most incredible sessions I've ever done in my life. I mean, it was so much fun. I mean, he's so gracious and an incredible singer. But when he first started singing, he was singing in that AC/DC range.
Yeah.
And Slash and I looked at each other and went, this is not good. This is not going to work. And then we made the suggestion to bring it down, and it was like the aha moment. It's like, oh, this is exactly what the song needs. And I think that's the reason Slash said, oh, you're the guy to do it. And he was phenomenal. It just really worked out well.
It was very cool.
Yeah.
And it was really his own natural thing to bring it down. I don't think we really suggested it. I think we were humming and hawing a little bit, but I think he wanted to bring it down. And once he did, and knew that we were cool with
Yeah,
that.
maybe he expected
he went
us
to town with it.
sing in that range.
Yeah, it's
you
a
know,
whole different side of the guy. I mean, it's really terrific.
Wants to do more of it.
Yeah, right,
He's hit me up
mean,
with
one
some
man's opinion,
other
you should.
cover songs, and
Yeah. Here's the other. Among many great moments on this album, Iggy Pop and Awful Dream.
That's a good one. Well, all right. So while we were in rehearsal, sort of getting the songs together, Johnny, who's not here, but our bluesball bass player, he goes, I read somewhere that Iggy Pop, because I didn't tell everybody what we were doing with all the singers right away. We were just jamming the songs.
Oh, you didn't tell the band?
I was still going through it in my mind. And so when Johnny sort of caught wind of what was happening, he goes, well, and I think I'd had all the singers listed in my mind already. But he goes, I read somewhere that Iggy Pop has always wanted to do a blues record. And that sounded just far-fetched to me. I was like, huh. And so I'm going to check. I'm going to find out. So I called him up and we talked. And he goes, yeah, I just never had the opportunity. I said, if you were going to do a blues song, which one would it be? And without even thinking, he just said Awful Dream by Lightning Hopkins. So I knew this has been something that's been on his mind for a long time.
Clearly. Yeah.
So I thought, okay, and this is the only singer that picked his own song, because everybody else, I had the song and I called him up.
Sure.
But he chose that song. And so we set up a date to meet at my studio in here in LA. And he showed up and we sat on a couple stools about this far, maybe, in the sort of the lounge of the studio.
Sure.
And we just played the song live. And if you listen to the original, it's so Lightning Hopkins in the moment that it's silly to try and replicate it, because it's just got a certain feel that you would have to get all the mistakes and everything. So I got the basic gist of it. I just played it the way that I felt it. And then Iggy started singing, and it was really fucking cool.
It's the most, to my ears, the most intimate moment.
Yeah, it was very intimate.
On the album. But again, to my mind, it presents perhaps a challenge to you, Mike, given all the different singers and guitar players and people coming into the project, how to keep the sonics consistent.
Well, it was interesting because, like Slash said, the original is very stripped down and very live and very, very gutsy. And I think we had talked about how are we going to record this, because you couldn't do it the way that he did it. I mean, that was the original. There was just no way it would fall on its face. So we set up a time for him to come, and we had decided that it was going to be just drums and Slash playing guitar and Iggy singing. And in my mind, I thought, well, we'll do this and maybe we'll throw a bass on it. But we ended up not even needing anything. So we had the drums set up in one room. Slash was playing his guitar acoustic. So there was a bit of leakage in it. And Iggy was just sitting on a stool and he sang it live. I think we did it 3 or 4 times. And
If that, I only remember 2 or 3 times.
yeah, maybe just 3 times. And it was just magical. And there was a moment on there, I have to bring this up, that Slash said to me, we were doing a playback in the control room, and he said, "What's that noise at the end of the song?" I said, "That's Iggy. That's Iggy pretending that he's playing the harp." And I think you were a little bit unsure about it at first.
It was an odd sound.
It's so cool, though.
I know.
That's so cool.
But I said, that's,
Welcome to downtown Los Angeles.
yeah. But I said that is the magic of that. I mean, just that part. And I had played it for Beth Hart when she came down to the studio, and she said, "That's magical." I mean, it was. It just was really, really cool.
Yeah. By the way, parenthetically, were you playing a baritone on that?
Yeah, the song is originally in, I think it's in B or whatever. And I just gotten this particular acoustic guitar, which is a baritone 12-string.
Yeah.
And it came to mind. And so I thought, yeah, I'm going to do that with that guitar. And it's here, actually. And so I took it down there, and it just, yeah, it's cool.
It's the perfect thing. It's the perfect thing. So let's talk a little bit about Gary Clark and Crossroads.
Yeah.
Because that it's almost going from one extreme to the other, from Awful Dream to something like working with Gary Clark on a classic blues song.
Well, originally I was talking about doing Crossroads Blues, the Robert Johnson.
The Robert Johnson, yeah.
And so I was still toying with that idea in my mind, or doing the sort of Cream version of it, which I love, right? But it was a great excuse to call Gary, because I love Gary's playing. Gary's a great guy, and we had met probably just a couple of years prior while I was on the road. We played the same venue a day apart, And so in the conversation with him on the phone, as I was telling him what we were going to do, or what I was doing, I told him Crossroads from the Cream-like version. Just clicked over because I knew an electric version is what we needed. And so he was making his own record, which he's touring on right now. Uh-huh. And I think he needed a break. And so I could tell he was like, great, I can just leave here for a minute, go do something fun that I don't have to think about, and I'll go back to work afterwards. And so he came in. He's one of the few guys that played live with us when we recorded the actual music.
Yeah.
And we had a great time.
Yeah. The track really screams. But it brings up something. I read an interview with you, Mike, talking about this project.
Probably the only interview I did.
Well, I find them. And you were talking about when Gary came into the studio, and before you guys had really started to record, that he was just kind of, working out where he might fit in and trying some things. And you said that is the perfect moment to interact with an artist, to give an artist feedback about where and how an artist might fit in. And to my untrained mind, I thought that's a really artful thing to do, is to go to a great artist and interact with them about what it is they're about to do. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, Slash had the way that he was playing the song. And so Gary had to figure out how he fit into that. And I always said it was like, Slash and Izzy playing on the Guns N' Roses. They were just trying to find how to interact on each other. And really what I did was just, if I heard something that he was playing, because he was playing, pretty softly and trying to figure out what he was doing. And I would just point out, Gary, that part, that what you're doing right here really works well. So it's just about encouraging someone and helping them to know what works better than something else. And just guide them, and that's basically what I would do.
Mike's pretty good at making you feel comfortable in the studio and in a sincere way, so it's not like just producer tricks. It really lets you just chill in the studio and sort of become part, and feel comfortable and not feel rushed and not feel like you have to do this or you have to do that. Just be there.
Yeah.
And whatever you want to do, just do it.
Yeah. Well, and it comes out when you listen to the record. The other of many tracks that stood out, Hoochie Coochie Man and Billy Gibbons. And if I understand correctly, he was the toughest one to get. Is that true?
Well, okay. I mean, Billy's a road dog like me, so anytime that you try to reach him, he's somewhere out there, right? So, but I was dead set on having him on this track. I just knew that he was the perfect guy for it. And so I just kept reminding him about it to the point of annoyance, I'm sure. But then there was also, he knows me, he knows what I do. But at the same time, a lot of young whippersnappers like myself grab a hold of a Muddy Waters song and turn it into a LA metal thing, and call it blues, right?
Yeah.
But I was like, no, we're doing a really cool version of it. Well, are you doing it in E? Are you doing an A? No, we're doing the E version. So he was like, oh, okay. So finally, I sent him a demo of it just so he could see what it sounded like. And then eventually I nailed him down. He was going to be in Palm Springs, and he let me know he was going to be in Palm Springs. We have a friend there as a studio, and he was just going to do the thing. And I was like, yes. All right. And he did. He did it over one night. This is one of the sessions I wasn't at. And he sent it back. I got it sent back to me, and it was just fucking, like, I can't imagine anybody covering that song better than he did it.
Yeah.
So
What stood
fucking
out
cool.
to you about his playing?
So was he originally, and because I can't remember, he was just going to sing it originally, and then he played guitar as well.
I
Or
don't
was
think
that-
we don't think we really discussed it, but yeah, singing it was
That was
sort
a
of
priority,
But I
yeah.
mean, I was so happy that because I was just to get him to do anything really. I mean, I was hanging by a thread trying to get him to do it. But the fact that he put a guitar on there was great, and he put a lick on there that I actually every time I hear it, I have to play it in my fingers in my head because it's just so perfect, and I know that it only took him 5 seconds to do it.
That's why great artists are great artists. So here's another track that stood out to me, just because it's such an interesting choice to be on this record is the old Peter Green Fleetwood Mac track "Oh Well," with Chris Stapleton, by the way. Tell me a little bit about how you chose that track. Was that something that you had always had in your
No,
mind?
that sort of came like very spontaneously. Chris is like when I first really became aware of Chris was I was doing it was a Guns N' Roses tour, and he opened up some shows, and I wasn't really I'd heard his name before, but he was amazing from what I heard. Like really like one of those standout talents that you don't hear very often. And so that was stuck in my mind. And then I started working with Dave Cobb on a Conspirators record, and he produced. So there was Chris Stapleton all over the studio and stuff like that. Anyway, so I ended up hearing more. Megan, my girlfriend, she was very familiar with his stuff, and so I ended up listening to it. Anyway, so when I was trying to think of who could do vocals for "Oh Well," Chris Stapleton was sort of like a far-fetched idea, but a good idea.
Yeah.
And I really honestly didn't think that he'd be interested in doing it. But, as with this whole record, you just got to make the call and see what happens. And so I got in touch with him, got his number from somebody who probably shouldn't have given it to me, but he gave it to me anyway. And I just cold called him. Hey, Chris. Fortunately, he knew who I was because he'd opened up for Guns N' Roses, so there's no way he didn't know who I was. Or he could have, but... and he was really gracious about it, really, really down for it, and it was cool. And he was another one. The two holdovers were Billy and Chris. And with Chris, it was the same thing. He was on the road, so we had to find a place where he could do it. And then he got sick at one point and had to go back to Nashville. But he bent over backwards to get it done for me.
Yeah. And that dude, I mean, in addition to being a great guitar player, he can sing.
Yeah,
He can
No,
sing.
I just saw him recently, a whole show of his.
Yeah.
And it's just really sort of jaw dropping.
Yeah.
How good he is.
Yeah, terrific. So a track on the record that harkens back to the blues ball era, "Living for the City," because I know back in the day, you guys did Superstition.
Yeah.
Tell-
You did your homework.
It's my job.
We used to play anything and everything in blues ball, and we just go up there and play live, and it was just a lot of fun. And Superstition was one of those songs that I just used to love to jam on because it's a great funky riff, and you can do all kinds of stuff with it. So fast forward all these years later, and we're looking at the set list, and I want to do a Stevie Wonder song, but there's something just corny, and I mean, a lot of these songs have been done to death, but that one, I just didn't really. We're going to record this, and it has to be cool. So I said, well, there's another Stevie Wonder song that really was a massive influence on me when I was like 9 years old and Innervations came out. And that was Living for the City, which as a little boy, I just used to, my imagination went wild with that. This is the perfect, soundtrack for this.
I was just going to say, the car horns and the motorcycles, perfect.
Yeah,
We're good.
It was just that song fascinated me. So, working with Tash Neal, who's got a great sort of soulful kind of voice for this kind of thing. I asked him, I said, would you be into doing Living for the City? And he's always down to do whatever, but he was like cool, sincerely into doing it. And I was like, let's do that. And we sat with, we worked on that arrangement to truncate the original. We didn't try to pretend to copy all the parts that are on that song or the sound effects and all that. And Mike, you came down a couple times, listened to it, us jam it, and get to the point where it was passable to do it.
Yeah, because the arrangement on it, that's not a simple thing.
No, but I think because listen, Michael, Johnny, Ted, and Tash are all really great to work with and really, really pliable and all have great ideas. And so you get into something like that. We really worked hard on it to try and figure out how many times this needed to go, blah, 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 blah. And those are the kind of guys you can work something out like that with.
How much discussion, I know we talked a little bit about the discussion about the overall sound, but particularly with you and guitars, and not to get too far into the guitar nerd world, although I love that. How much discussion went around guitars, amps, what the choices would be?
Well, okay, so initially going into this record, I knew that I didn't want it to be a Wall & Marshall's Les Paul thing. So I got a bunch of combos that I have, and I brought those down to rehearsal, and I brought, a couple Les Pauls and a couple guitars that you wouldn't expect me to use, and a 335 and so on. And so, I had a little Dumble, really cool. Actually, probably the last one that he made before he passed. Little Dumble combo, and a couple of Fender Deluxes, this, that, and the other. And I also had a Magnetone combo that I've had forever. I never actually used before. And so I think I was going through the whole sort of searching process, and then just got comfortable, and then. I can speak for you, I guess. And Mike was like, he was cool with whatever it was that I was working with,
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because the first day I went down to rehearsals, I walked in and I looked across the room and I saw a 335. And I thought, what's that doing in here? And now the interesting point of that is that during the Use Your Illusions record, we were looking for a little bit of a different sound on one song. And I had a 335, a 1966 335, and I handed it to Adam Day, his guitar tech, and he tuned it up and handed it to Slash, and he kind of played around with it a little bit, on the song, and went, that's not going to work. That's just not me. Fast forward, I walk into rehearsal, and there was a 335, and I just loved the sound of that, and I was so happy to see that in there. And the other thing is that we had the Magnetones that were in there, which I wasn't that familiar with. And because he's a Les Paul Marshall guy. So, you know, another left turn for me. And it just was part of the sound. It really worked out well. And during the course of making the record, you know, Slash has a plethora of great instruments. I mean, you name it, he has it, except for a 330, by the way. And you know, we would try it. It says, you know, what do you think of this sound? And we made the decisions rather quickly. He didn't even have to play a whole song all the way through. We knew right away if the sound was going to work or not. And then we picked the one that worked best and guitar wise and went with it.
You know, one of the things that has changed dramatically since you guys first worked together is recording technology. And you know, the choices now in terms of what you can do in the studio are seemingly endless. And I'm wondering how you guys work through that in terms of the endless amount of choices available for this record.
What do you mean by choices, though?
Well,
I mean,
just, you know,
you
Pro
mean- are you
Tools
talking
and
about
bringing in
tapes or no?
all kinds of, you know, all kinds of different sounds and
Plugins,
effects, and,
fractals.
you know, and isolating people in rooms, and you know, all of those types of choices.
Well, for me, I love a nice live sounding room. I love a great analog console, which is we ended up doing the record at East West. They have a great Neve console.
East West fans.
Maybe some people who work at East West might be here.
Oh, even better.
And so I love that. And you know, the technology has changed. You know, it used to be tape on Appetite. I'm literally cutting the tape, you know, to put the takes together. And I'll never forget the first time I did an edit on the 24 track. I cut it in front of Duff, and he goes, "What are you doing?" You know. But you know, I went into Pro Tools very slowly, even though I was an early adopter. I was there at Pro Tools when it was only 2 tracks. But I wasn't a big fan because of the A to D converters to get technical. Didn't sound great. But through the years, like right now, with all the great analog gear going in, it really has a nice warm sound to it. It's a great storage medium. And I use it as a tool, not as a crutch. When I'm recording, I don't record things I don't need. Like some people will go in and record 30, 40 extra parts. I don't do that. I know what I want. I know it's going to make the song and what's going to be used for the mix. And I edit in my head as we're doing it. So
Yeah.
it's just a storage medium, just like a tape machine.
Yeah.
I've had experiences with producers that want to record 700 things and then we'll sift through it. I'm like, no.
We're not doing that. Yeah. So back to some of the tracks on the record. Another surprise for me anyway. Demi Lovato and Papa Was a Rolling Stone. Did you have her in mind for that track?
Well, there's a longer story to that. Okay, after Blues Ball, I had a band called Snake Pit that Johnny was the bass player in, and we had this great singer named Rod Jackson, who's a phenomenal singer, and he's an eternal fuck up. And he's out there somewhere not working because he doesn't feel like it. Anyway, but so he you know, we started. I wanted to do Papa Was a Rolling Stone. I always loved that groove and so on. And he could sing it, and so we used to do it actually during Snake Pit. So when we were doing the Blues Ball or this blues record, bluesish record, that song I wanted to do. And since we're using different singers, I didn't want to get some guy like Rod that could sing it perfectly the way that was on the record. I want something completely different. And I thought of Demi. She was the first person that came to mind because she's got a certain background that is a little tweaked on the edges, right? And I know her, and I know where she's coming from. And she's got this great sort of young voice, but at the same time, she's got this amazing falsetto. Mm-hmm. So I called her up and I told her about it. And again, this happened throughout the making of the record. I called these people up not knowing what to expect. And they had a relationship with the particular track, like some history with it or whatever. So I was really lucky.
Not known to you.
No, yeah, no. So it was like almost cosmic how that came together. Anyway, so she loved that song, and it meant something to her on a visceral level and some personal experiences or whatever it was. I didn't dig about it. but she wanted to do it. And so Mike and I went down, we recorded the music part of it. And then Mike and I went down to a studio here in LA that she works out of, and sat there with her while she did it. And it was awesome.
Because again, it's, not unlike Brian Johnson. This is, to my ear, Demi Lovato in a way you've not heard her previously.
Yeah, definitely different.
Yeah, yeah.
But I have to say, I was blown away with her. Her work ethic is absolutely amazing. I mean, she was in the booth. I think she might have been in there for like 2 hours, just solid singing. And every take, she would get it better and better and better. And she didn't want to come out until it was done. I mean, hardly anybody has that kind of endurance as a singer.
Yeah.
I mean, she is absolutely world class.
Yeah.
It was amazing. And instrumentally, the way that whole track came together, arrangement wise, with the keyboards and the way it worked with her vocals and the guitars and the drums and bass, obviously. I mean, I'm really happy with that track. I love it.
One of the cool things that's on there is the guitar and the vocals play off of each other, but the guitars were done already. It just that's just the way the vocal and, the way that she heard it and the way it ended up. So it was really cool.
One of the things we haven't done, and we should do this, is tell us about the band on the album.
Okay. A couple of them are here. Anyway, it was Teddy Zigzag Andreatis, who I've been friends with. This goes back to the 90s, and I used to, he remembers everything. So I can't remember the origins of this, but I used to go jam with his band, the Screaming Cocktail Hour, at the Baked Potato in Studio City.
Yep.
And I would come in the middle of the night and want to jam. And I would go every night if I could. And just drink and jam and drink and jam. And I got to be, Teddy and I might have met before that. I don't remember the exact moment that we met. But Johnny was playing bass with him, so I got to know Johnny. And then there was different drummers in the mix. BB Chunking, do you remember him? He's a blues guitar player.
Yeah.
He was in the band, and he was awesome. And Alan, whose last name is Greek, I can't remember it, he was a guitar player, and they're really good guitar players, so it was good for me. I think I needed the outlet, because in Guns N' Roses, being a stadium band, there's a lot of improv, but there's not a lot of room to really sort of improv like that, where you
Stretch
just
out.
don't care, and you just, you try to, but it doesn't work like that. So I would go out and jam all the time in different cities with people I didn't know and go and play. So this was like local. I could just go and hang out with these guys. So that's where Teddy and I got to be friends. And actually, Teddy came in as a favor to me and played in Guns N' Roses for a leg of the tour, where we had early on in the tour for User Illusions, where we had girl background singers and girl horn players, and Ted played the other pianos. Sort of an idea. Axl wanted to get the big band sound that we had on the record.
Yeah.
I said, well, we have to have girls, because we can't have guys up there playing horns. It's just not. It's not going to be. It's going to be corny.
That's no fun.
And Teddy helped me put all that together, and yeah. So we've been good friends. And Johnny, playing bass, was sort of my partner in crime too, and he was in Snake Pit and also obviously Blues Ball.
Yeah.
And then Tash, I did this blues. I forgot what it was. It was some sort of a benefit here downtown somewhere, and a bunch of cool players up there. And one of them was Tash, and he just got up there and sang and played guitar, and I was just like, who's that guy? It was really good. So we hung out in the green room later and got to be friends, and then had his band open for the Conspirators in 2022 while we were out on the road, and he had this amazing band.
Yeah.
And so when I started putting this together, I wanted to get another guitar player, and not at that point. I think I was thinking about vocals, but I hadn't pinned. Living for the City yet as the thing for sure.
Sure.
So I just asked him if he wanted to come in and play and do whatever, and he was totally down for it. Tash is like that. He's really easygoing. And so he came in, and then we had a drummer when we first started, somebody that was sort of one of the original blues ball guys, but he had a lot of stuff going on, and it just got to a point where we were sort of under the gun to get all our arrangements together within a certain amount of time and then get into the studio. It was already booked, so on. So he wasn't really, he was sort of falling behind. So and Mike and I sat and talked about this, and so I had some drummers initially that I was going to call that I never did. That Jimmy Vivino, the
Sure.
from Conan O'Brien, and,
Yep.
he gave me some phone numbers. So we're like, we have a very small amount of time to get this sorted out, and it's a really big deal, you know. And so I called these guys, and they came in, and the last guy that came in was Michael Jerome Moore, who is here,
Yes.
and he blew my mind. Like, we did maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 bars of something, and I said, oh, this guy. And so Mike, so I thought, okay, so I tell Mike, we found a really great guy, and Mike is very serious about drums. You know, it's like a really important facet, you know, how somebody plays and how they feel a song, and all these different facets that I don't necessarily think about. It's just, if it feels good, it feels good, and if it doesn't, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he was a little skeptical that I was excited about the guy, that this was the guy, but then he came down and he was like, oh, so we were like, okay, we're off and running. So that's sort of how all that came
The band.
together.
Yeah.
Good bunch of guys.
Yeah. So we're running down on time. I've got time for a couple more questions, and it really speaks more to the nature of collaboration. First of all, why does this collaboration work so well, Mike?
You would think it's an easy question, but it's actually not. I mean, I think that, you know, going back from the very first recording that we did, Shadow Your Love, Guns N' Roses had been through 2 or 3 other producers before you got to me. Yeah, no, but you had, and actually you had gone in the studio a couple times, and without great results. And I think that the band was a little fragile at the time. So during that recording of Shadow Your Love, I gained the trust of everybody. I let the band know that I had their best interest at heart. I wasn't going to throw anybody under the bus as long as they performed and did well. And the track turned out really well, and we went on to, you know, to make the record. So I think it's a matter of trust. And the other thing, I don't waste anybody's time. I mean, when Slash is out there playing, I'll stop the machine right away if it's not right. And because I know instantly if it's not right, and he trusts me that my instincts are correct. So I don't want to waste anybody's time. So there's that, and we really have a great relationship working together. I mean, he'll go, "What do you think?" And I'll go through it and pick out a couple things, and you know, he'll leave the room and he goes, "Okay, you know, I hear a couple things as well," and it's just a great working relationship, you know.
Yeah. And Slash, last question. So music making is really all about collaboration.
Wait, I don't get to say why.
Oh, no, go right ahead.
Oh, 'cause
If you want to jump in.
It's
absolutely.
true, the trust factor.
Yeah.
I never really actually put a word to it, but that's the thing, is you feel like you trust somebody's opinion, his instincts, and he knows guitars. And there's nobody that I've met since Michael that knows guitars like he knows how guitars should sound. I've worked with a lot of great guys,
Yeah.
but there's only one person that really knows, that's ever really
Here.
how to capture my guitar and make me, you know. And I could go in there with a sound that I'm not necessarily like initially too excited about, but
Sure.
he'll get me to work it so it works. And then next thing you know, we've got a great guitar sound.
Yeah.
I don't have that kind of relationship with other producers. It's either there in the moment, or if it's not there, I just do it anyway. You know what I'm saying? Because I can't be bothered to sit with it for 6 hours. I'm not
Yeah.
going to do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of that. We have a great
Yeah.
working relationship.
Well, it's
and friendly relationship.
it's a beyond terrific project, and we're so pleased that you guys took the time to come down and tell us a little bit about it. But I know
I got to say, I want to say one thing before if we are doing Q&A, I don't know. But, you know, when you make a record, it's all about getting great performances, having great musicians in there, and it's also about gathering a great team. For me, you know, I have a team as well. I mean, Slash has his band, and I have a team of people. And, you know, I just want to say that, you know, I work with some of the best in the business, and I think they're here tonight. I don't know. I saw David Spring, who is one of my great engineers. He's here tonight. and John Spiker, who mixed the record with us. And I just want to give a shout out to them because it's a team.
Sure.
It's a team.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
He always has cool folks.
Yeah.
And they're great to work with too, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like I said, we're so pleased that you guys took the time to come down and talk about the project. More importantly, I know these folks and myself want to hear some music. So give it up one more time. Mike Clink /